Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Maithreyi Seetharaman.
Slovakia, at the heart.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to a wonderful sunny afternoon in the High Tatras. My name is Maithreyi Seetharaman. I'll be your moderator and host for the Tatra Summit, which is an exciting one. I call it my annual pilgrimage that I make every year. Thank you for joining us this year in person. It's so nice to see this room so full this year. Last year, expectedly, it wasn't as full, but I'm glad everyone's double vaxxed. We're very, very safe. We can be in the room together. And for those of you joining us online, thank you very much for your support. Keep joining in the conversations. I know the GLOBSEC team really, really appreciate it. This year, we are a more sustainable summit. I have to highlight this. We all may have used cars and planes to get here, but there was also this year a special train provided by the Ministry of Transport where the Green Deal focus group took place on the train. So very apt to set the tonality for the summit. You're also going to find a lot of young faces at the Tatra Summit this year. The Tatra Summit young professionals have been welcomed to encourage debate and dialogue with senior leaders to get a fresh perspective on the problems we're dealing with. So welcome them as well. We'll also have a whole lot of Q&A. This is an intimate summit. We want to talk to each other. We want to spark some ideas. So make sure you participate in the theme that we have for this year, which is Forged in Crisis, the European Economy Rebuilt Better. We can go on ad nauseum about how Europe seems to perform really well after every single crisis, but is this the crisis that will really change everything? We'll find out at least what you think through the sessions. The pandemic is, of course, the biggest crisis we've faced since World War II. So if Europe is not forged now, it never will be. So this year, we will facilitate those discussions and really focus on the policy recommendations and the business solutions we really need to make this happen. The focus for the EU ministerial meetings this time really did shift, though, from post-pandemic recovery to an energy crisis, and that really dominated the conversation. On the agenda was also the implementation of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, but again, where is the focus for politicians at this point? That is a quick question, and a question that will really ground us in our discussions around a deeper strategic, economic, digital, and green transformation. Now, the main program is going to be held in this particular room, so keep coming back to it for all of the sessions. We'll also have focus groups on the ground floor in the evening today and tomorrow. The awards dinners, we have a few of them. Check your invitations to which ones you're going for. We have buses for specific dinners, which your teams will tell you about. If you're in doubt, grab a hold of any of the wonderful GLOBSEC staff and they'll tell you where you're headed. That's at 8 o'clock this evening. You'll also have informal sessions. This is the best part about the Tatra Summit. We always manage to bring informality as a core part of what we do here on stage and outside this room. So we will have cocktails tonight at 10 o'clock. The best part of Tatra. It happens in the lobby downstairs. And for those staying longer, Saturday afternoon will be a mountain walk at Prednje Solisko, one of the mountains surrounding us here. I've done this. It's gorgeous. Do not miss it. Couple of housekeeping bits and bobs for you to know. Always wear your FFP2 mask, unless, of course, you're speaking here on stage or you're seated and eating. Keep disinfecting your hands. The WHO recommendation doesn't really go anywhere, even though we might be thinking that we are double vaxxed. The premises are going to be regularly disinfected. There'll be temperature screenings at the entrance, and the GLOBSEC team will ensure there's crowd control measures to make sure there is no overflow of guests anywhere. So you are very, very safe and in very safe hands with the GLOBSEC team. With that, I'm going to invite the president and founder of GLOBSEC, Róbert Vass, who is kindly hosting us for his opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Maithreyi. Dear Prime Minister, ministers, friends, welcome back. I'm very glad that you came to Tatras and that we are able to meet here. And let me welcome you on my behalf and on behalf of the chairman of the board of GLOBSEC, Willy Molterer, who is here with us as well. But I'm extremely glad that I can welcome you with two good news. When we need good news in this environment as much as we need. First is that the weather is great. We arrange a perfect weather. This is probably the last weekend of a great weather in Tatras. From Monday on it will be snowing. So we've made, the GLOBSEC team made everything that you can have a beautiful view outside, it's colorful, and to enjoy a little bit of fresh air. And number two is that we reached 100% of vaccination, at least in this room, which I think is absolutely great, because that's why we can meet here. If it would be maybe a few weeks later, maybe it would be more difficult, but all those who have been vaccinated are helping not only us, but the economies also to function. This year we are celebrating the 10th years anniversary of Tatra Summit. And when I look back 10 years ago, it was 2011. We were sitting with Ivan Korčok, then the permanent representative in Brussels, in the EU, in his garden. And we were brainstorming about the responses to euro crisis. At that time, we asked ourselves questions. Will the euro currency survive another year? What will happen to Greece? Does Central Europe know what it wants and how to fix the euro crisis? And actually, it was the crisis that the Slovak government, fell. And it was like chasing the train. We were constantly overtaken by events. We felt that the discussion in Central Europe and in Slovakia and in Brussels were like two absolutely separate universes. And there was an urgent need to bring closer the European debate and the debate in Slovakia, which was almost non-existent. So how to interconnect them? And we were convinced that if we want to influence the European politics and vice versa, we need to be part of a broader pan-European debate. So we created and established this platform. Within 10 years, I think it emerged into an intimate but still important forum for political and business leaders to discuss the political and economic future of Europe. And during that time, during these 10 years, Tatra Summit hosted hundreds of experts, politicians, European officials, and beyond. In this room, we have welcomed Olaf Scholz, probably the next Chancellor of Germany, who was sitting here a few years ago. Wolfgang Schäuble, Donald Tusk, Angel Gurria, Kristalina Georgieva. They all came here to discuss about the future of Europe and our economies, to our beautiful mountains. But it was not only about debates for these 10 years. For example, there were some memoranda signed between the ministers of finance of Visegrad 4 and France. Or Tatra Summit also gave birth to the Slovak Battery Alliance. So there are very concrete outcomes. But actually, when I look back at these 10 years, it is a decade of crisis and firefighting when we look at Europe. After the financial and economic crisis, migration crisis came. After that, Brexit. After that, pandemic. So we are in constant firefighting and events are dictating us and we are just reacting. So the key question today is, how could we go over this decade of firefighting? How could we create a vision? How could we use this pandemic into an opportunity? Can we turn it into an opportunity for our economies? And that's why the claim of this year's forum is great. Forging crisis, European economies rebuild better. There is a little anecdote that I want to share with you that illustrates my point. An elderly man went to the train station, wanted to book his tickets, and asked, I'd like to have a return ticket, please. And the clerk said, where to? And he says, back to here, of course. But this illustrates that we will never go back to the world before the pandemic. So what we need to do is we really need to use it and create a good opportunity how to reform our economies. I really think this is a momentum that we cannot lose. This task is not easy, and it cannot be sorted out only by governments. We need public-private collaboration. We need a broader mobilization of our public to make it happen. We need joint projects, joint initiatives, joint financing. And I hope this platform can help to mobilize that collaboration between public, private, media, and all the stakeholders. And I see three interconnected dimensions of reforms. First, it's the national level. I see here Prime Minister of Slovakia, who has just announced the reform autumn a few days ago. There are national recovery and resilience plans as part of the broader European strategy. On national level, we are trying to make EU Recovery Fund an impulse for sustainable growth, not only just a simple recovery. Second, there is a regional dimension, because the investment gap is so big that it cannot be filled only by European money. We need to mobilize the private capital, but we can do it only on the regional basis, because our economies are too small to mobilize private capital. That's why we need, and we came up with the idea of starting the Danube Tech Valley initiative, and we hope we will be able to move it further soon. Shall we create regional capital markets, or how to attract and keep talents here in this region? These are the key questions. And the third is the global element. And the global trends we need to watch, because they are defining, they will be defining our actions. That's why I'm glad that we have here in the room also the Secretary General of OECD, Mr. Cormann, who joined us here in Bratislava. We are very happy to have you. We can see that one of these effects, the global effects of the pandemic, is deglobalization. Slowly but surely, the multilateral system is unfortunately breaking up. The logistic difficulties brought to light by current crises are already pointing to a shift away from global just-in-time supply chains. Just think of the complications that the delays in the production of cars because of the lack of the chips created in Europe. Moreover, as economic difficulties mount, the inevitable growth of nationalism and my nation first politics will push companies also to localize business operations and favor national and regional supply chains. And thirdly, China's geopolitical rise has been more than 3 decades in the making. China has successfully transformed itself into an economic and technological superpower, but just few expected such a confrontational atmosphere that we are seeing now. Finally, the climate change policies will forge economies to go local. There will be pressure to get rid of the carbon footprint from production and global supply chains. And this is a huge opportunity for us and for Central Europe as well. So, how this translates into the situation in Central Europe, if you want to know more, you can look up our Strategic Transformation Index that you will see downstairs. So before I conclude my remarks, I just want to thank to all of our partners who have supported us, because without their support, it would be absolutely impossible to organize it. And I would like to thank, first of all, to the Ministry of Finance of the Slovak Republic here, represented by 2 Deputy Ministers, Deputy Minister Jančík and Deputy Minister Klimek. Thank you, and happy to have you with us. And also the Ministry of Foreign and European Affairs, represented here by Ivan Korčok, Ingrid Brodsková and Martin Klus, but also other partners like the European Investment Bank, National Bank of Slovakia, and corporate partners Raiffeisen Bank, VUB banka, Slovenská sporiteľňa, Slovnaft, Unifarma, Google, PMI, ABB, and many others who are on the list. Thank you for your great support and your dedication. So I wish you a good debate. I will not be much longer. It was already longer than I wished. And I would like to give you back floor to Maithreyi to introduce the first panel. So thank you, and I wish you good discussions over the next 2 days.
We always love hearing from you, Robert, so not to worry at all. Before we get started, raise your hands if this is your first time at a Tatra summit. Ooh, welcome newbies. Raise your hands if you've done every single one of them for the past 10 years. Haha. 3. Keep going to them to figure out how much it's changed. It's been a magnificent change. And now when people ask me what I think of the Tatra Summit, I usually liken it to Jackson Hole in a completely different environment. So there you go. That's the setting that we're going into, the spirit that we're going into our first conversation that sets out our groundwork for the next 2 days here in the mountains. We're talking about being forged in crisis, a Europe rebuilt better. So could I invite to our little stage Prime Minister of the Slovak Republic, Eduard Heger. the 6th Secretary General of the OECD, Mr. Mathias Cormann, CEO of UUP Bank and President of the Slovak Banking Association, Mr. Alexander Resch, and Paul Pasquali, Executive Director, Group European and Public Affairs at Raiffeisen Bank International. Gentlemen, last year we talked about a recovery fund. We have it now. It's big on the face of it. But the question we're faced with is how do we use all this firepower sensibly and in a way that it actually has impact and puts the health of our planet and our people at its very center? How do we balance recovery and resilience in the new normal? Are we still hankering for the old normal? Or are we finally at a point where this is the crisis that brings unity to Europe or not? So let me start with the audience first. I'd love for you to get involved. If you have a point to make, a question to raise your hand, catch my eye. I will keep coming back to you, but when you do speak, make it really, really short. We have lots of time outside to speak. And also give us your name, your organization, and the country that you're from so we get a perspective of where you're coming from. And wait for the mic to get to you if you possibly can. So the question here says, we seem to be careening from one crisis to another. Just as we start getting a grip on how to recover from COVID, we are dealing with an energy crisis. We're heading into a supply chain issue, which is waiting for us just a couple of months down, if it's not already here. Prices are going up, inflation's going up. Firms are struggling across the board, not just here in Europe and in Central Europe, but across the world. Everything seems to be taking us by surprise. Surprise, yet again. So are we once again headed for a trap where we're going to try and address an immediate crisis and somehow lose our perspective and the longer-term vision that we have of building the stronger Europe with a green focus, a green recovery at its center? I want to start with you, Prime Minister.
No, not at all. We are definitely not in trap. The reason why I say that, and I was thinking, because I knew that this question will come, and I think we're facing a lot of challenges. And I say challenges, not problems, because they are really challenges. But we are facing a great opportunity. And that's myself, being a Prime Minister in this turbulent time, I always wait for the day when there will be better news than the news before. Somehow I get the opposite, and you listed them. You listed them, and it's growing. We thought, okay, pandemic is the crisis. Now we see the economic crisis that related to it. Now we see the energy crisis. We're asking whether we're going to have enough energies, etc. And we wonder what else could come. But being in the crisis over the last 1.5 years, we see that it's manageable. And the reason why I said it's a great opportunity, I see what's happening within the Europe. If we go before the crisis, you could see that Europe was speaking about integration, institutional integration. We're looking for ways how to make us more integral. And it caused a lot of political, I would say, discomfort. Some countries said yes, some countries said no way. But then the crisis came, somehow everything went away, and we were looking for a solution to survive the crisis. And you could see a different and very interesting motion among the leaders. One thing, first it was maybe a little panic because COVID wasn't here, or basically this kind of epidemic wasn't here for 100 years. So nobody really had a clue how to deal with it. But much more things on the European level got faster. Cooperation among the countries was, I would say, easier after the first turbulent times where everybody was, we have in Slovakia saying that the shirt is closer than the coat. So yes, some countries started to look at themselves, how to help themselves, and then the others. Just like you know, it's happening in the airplane. But the thing is that after that, we were thinking, okay, we need to help each other. And this is the great opportunity. That any crisis that will come, and yes, there will be some crisis coming. I think the energy crisis will be a rather shorter one. But we definitely know, and I can share that from the discussion that we have at the leaders of the European Council, that we all realize we'll do better if we work together. And we had a Western Balkans summit this week, and I heard from the leaders, they said, please, if you come up with a solution, don't leave us out. So that's another important fact, that It's about cooperation, and the cooperation will be based on real needs, not on artificial ones, not that we need to be institutionally more integral because it might look from a design perspective better. No, it will be based on the real needs. And if we are willing to help each other, we will build a stronger Europe, and Europe must become stronger. It must become a leader within the world. So that's why I think it's a great opportunity.
Mr. Cormann, do you agree with that? Do you believe that Europe has the ability to look beyond crisis to crisis, which it has been known for? Your predecessor had a famous saying that Europe takes a while to get to where it needs to be, but it gets there in the end. Are we still on the journey, on the road to getting there?
Well, firstly, what this COVID pandemic and the crisis that we've gone through has shown is what we can achieve and what we can actually get on top of when we put our mind to it. I mean, overwhelmingly, if you look at where we are now compared to where we thought we would be, I mean, we're in a very strong position. I mean, when the COVID pandemic first hit and, all of the expectations, were, I mean, it's been a terrible crisis, but if you look at where we now are, I mean, vaccines were developed much more quickly than was anticipated. I mean, the economic recovery is underway, the economic growth is picking up, the economic outlook is improving. I mean, since the middle of 2020, we have continuously upgraded our growth projections moving forward. And the reason for that is because governments across Europe and around the world have got on top of the health situation relatively well and relatively quickly. They've put a lot of policy support. There's been a lot of monetary and fiscal policy support, which has, which has protected, I guess, businesses and households from the worst impacts of the crisis. And we're now in a good position to build for a stronger, a better future. And in terms of your question on Europe, I mean, I've got a very positive view about what Europe has achieved. I mean, if you look over the last 5, 6, 7 decades, I mean, where Europe came from and where Europe is today. I mean, I was born in Europe, I grew up in Europe, and then went to Australia for 30 years, and coming back to sort of see the strength and the like-mindedness in the broad and what has been achieved in terms of economic prosperity and political stability across the broad European continent. I mean, I think it's fantastic. Now, in terms of where we go to from here, I mean, of course there will be external shocks, there will be crises, and there will be challenges. But if we put our mind to it, if we work together, if we cooperate, we can get on top of them. I mean, that's what the response to the pandemic has shown. And I mean, what do we need to do? Well, we do need. I mean, we did have sluggish productivity growth before the crisis. How can we get on top of that? We did have the climate change challenge before the crisis, and this is a generational challenge that we need to get on top of. And like the virus, emissions don't stop at anyone's border, and so we do have to have an ambitious and effective, but also globally coordinated approach to that. And one of the reasons why we went through the pandemic comparatively well, the health management response was effective in the broad. Vaccines were available more quickly than we thought. Monetary and fiscal policy support went in very fast and very effectively, but also the digital transformation accelerated strongly in the context of the pandemic, helping businesses and communities adjust. And there's lots of opportunity in the digital and green transformation to build a stronger, cleaner, fairer economy of the future. And I mean, I think that that's what we have to put our mind to. That's what we've got to cooperate on. And I think that there's lots of positive opportunity. And I believe that the future is bright as long as we learn the right lessons out of the pandemic, which is that we've got to cooperate and work together across nations and across continents.
Ms. Pasquali, do you agree? Are you that optimistic that we're going to stay on track for this green recovery that we've been promised?
Well, thank you. First, let me say thank you to our host, Prime Minister. It's my first time here. I'm very honored, and it's a beautiful place, and exactly the spirit or the idea behind it is perfect, which is also close to our heart as Raiffeisen Group, because we act in the region. It's bringing Brussels closer to the region and also having this link between politics, economies, and of course the financial sector. Mm-hmm. Honestly, I'm quite impressed that this time it happened the reactions in Brussels were very fast. As has been said, also central banks reacted in the right way very fast, much faster than before. The banks also acted, I think, in the right way. We entered the crisis in a much sounder position than the last time. And I think what is crucial that there is, as the Prime Minister said, there is a vision that unites us in Europe. Of course, the devil is in the detail at the end of the day, but there is a vision. We have a next generation EU program that sets the right priorities, and I think next generation will be not pushing problems to the next generation, but providing them with opportunities. And this is, if we get it right, it's also in particular true for Central and Eastern Europe. There are huge opportunities out there, and we are very positive and open to contribute.
Mr. Resch, positive? As positive?
Yes and no. I'm very much optimistic. I'm very much positive about where we are right now, the momentum which we got, and which I believe would not have been possible prior to COVID-19. The healthcare crisis which we have, or the pandemic which we went through a year ago, has mobilized, I would say, many positive aspects of our society. If I remember what happened 18 months ago in Slovakia, where we started to talk, to have dialogues among cross sectors, among policymakers, private sector, which have not been possible before, in a very open and in a very positive and constructive way. That's also why I believe that it was managed so good. And this it creates, I would say, a general shift of what are the values in the society, in the community, cooperation, as was mentioned by the Prime Minister. So from this perspective point of view, I'm optimistic. I'm also optimistic of what we are facing right now, which is obviously some hiccups or some further evolutions. And I'm very much optimistic what we will achieve in the next generation program on an EU level. There's a huge topic. It's not only green, it's not only about energy. There's a lot about social aspects as well, inequality, inclusion, and these aspects which need to be touched and which I believe are very, very much important. So I believe there is a good momentum, there's good positive energy, a lot of people want to contribute and we want to drive. The trap I see is in the execution, because you can have very good ideas, and we have a lot of very good ideas, but if you look what the next generation foresees by 2030 or by 2050, Europe wants to be neutral, climate neutral, or emission neutral. 2030, we want to reduce by minus 55%. I think the implementation will be the biggest challenge, so that we will have initiatives which will assure us that we will be there in 6 years or 7 years or 8 years where we want to be. And there we need to be very careful not to fall in the trap of a short-term view, which currently everybody is talking about energy prices, you know, where it was a couple of days 160, now it's 120 something. This morning when I followed, we need to be very careful that we don't lose this long-term view. So, and that's a big challenge ahead of us. And cross-functional, it's not only policymakers, private sector, everybody of the community. So
how do we do that, Prime Minister? How do you balance the politics of it? For short term, when you're being told by companies that they need your help, bail us out, otherwise you're going to lose productivity, you're going to lose jobs. That's a bit of a scary threat to be making. And then you're looking at your long-term vision where you want this to be a sustainable green recovery. How do you balance the politics?
I'm not sure about the word bail us out or bail them out. I don't think that's the right term, and that's not the right solution.
Let's use help.
I fully agree. Help, cooperation. Well, as you heard, I think we see an opportunity, but what's the difference between opportunity and a success? Hard work. If we want to have success, and we must have success, we'll have to sweat, and we will sweat. We must sweat. So what I mean by that, professionality, cooperation, and the execution. Because yes, now we have all the plans are written well. We have experience of not having good execution. Here in Slovakia, it's difficult. Because sweat requires, or hard work requires sweat, and not everybody wants to sweat. But if we want to succeed, we must sweat, we must cooperate. So definitely the dialogue, and I'm glad, and I remember the time when I got into the position of Minister of Finance, and the crisis occurred. And we had a very constructive discussion with the banking sector, with the other sectors, companies, because we had to find a solution together. Because if you want to finance, you need to have the help of the banking sector. Not just the central bank of Europe, but also the banks here, the Central Bank of Slovakia, and I remember Governor how he was helpful. So it worked well. We have the experience of a good cooperation. Good, we need to go higher. And that's the way to go. And also inspire each other. I saw it last year. That we were looking country to country. What they did, okay, that's a good solution. Let's imply. Kurzarbeit was something that some countries knew and others didn't really reflect. We saw that that was the pill. That was the medicine for sustaining the labor in their jobs, helping the companies to get by. It was costly, very costly, but worthy. Because the social aspect of the citizens were kept in like security, so that was important. And now we're facing the energies. Yes, we will have to be very effective on not overspending. And I think when we speak about the green economy, when we speak about the energy from short and midterm, we have to start to speak how we're going to make the rest of the world greener. Because yes, Europe will become greener. Will be the greenest of the whole world. But I'm asking, is this enough? Are we going to pay the whole bill? Because I think it needs to be worldwide if we want to save this planet.
Mr. Cormann, that's an interesting point, right? When you speak as the Secretary General of the OECD to your members, what is the advice you give them? Because Prime Minister Heger is not alone in the quandary he faces.
Well, I mean, the Prime Minister is right. I mean, when it comes to climate change, the only way we're going to solve it is through an appropriately globally comprehensive approach, a globally coordinated approach. Europe is providing leadership, and I'm very confident that Europe will continue to provide leadership, but we need to have a vehicle for multilateral cooperation that finds the right solutions internationally. And I mean, we've had one recent example of great success when it comes to multilateral coordination, that is reform of our international tax arrangements in the context of digitalization and globalization. In fact, the inclusive framework with bringing together about 140 countries around the world is meeting right now to try and put the final touches on that deal, and that will make our international tax arrangements fairer and work better in the context of digitalization and globalization. Now, I believe, and I've said this publicly, we need something similar when it comes to the climate. We need something similar when it comes to carbon pricing arrangements around the world. You know, in the end, what is the challenge? I mean, we want to be able to lift the level of ambition and effort in a way that doesn't create unfair trade distortions and counterproductive environmental outcomes. I mean, you want to be able to lift your level of ambition on climate in a way that helps to reduce emissions globally rather than to just shift them into other parts of the world, and that doesn't have negative competitiveness and I guess trade implications. So how do we best do this at a time when all around the world, while there is an increasing number of countries that commits themselves to global net zero, there are different circumstances, different starting positions, and different policy mixes that are used in different parts of the world. How do you bring all of that together into one coordinated approach that is effective and fair? Effective, as I say, because it helps reduce global emissions and doesn't just shift them, and fair because every country and every part of the world carries a fair and proportionate part of the burden. And that is where I think the OECD and others can hopefully play a positive and constructive role in bringing the European perspectives and perspectives in other parts of the world onto one page to make sure we can get to global net zero in a way that is effective and fair all around.
If you don't mind me following that up with a question, you've been in this position of having to balance the politics, just like Mr. Heger. How do you bring that experience on being on the other side of the debate, if I can put it that way, to feeding in your strategy now of heading to net zero, despite all of the pressures that you get from trade unions, from your industries that dominate within your countries? That experience, how do you draw from that in your ambitions as the boss of the OECD at this point?
Well, I mean, balancing the politics is essentially making sure that you know, you're very clear in explaining what the problem is. You're very clear in how you're seeking to address it. And you know, you make the case, and you know, that is, you know, in the end, the political dynamics in relation to an issue like climate change will be different in different parts of the world, depending, I guess, on the starting position, circumstances, and broader economic and political context. But in the end, you know, if we have a mission that we all agree on, if there is a pathway, and it's not just about tomorrow, it's about the transition pathway over a period. Then, I mean, you know, in the end, you got to explain what it is that you're doing and why, and you got to try and take people with you. I mean, in the end, to have certainty around policy settings over the medium to long term, you're only going to achieve that if you've got a broad public consensus backing you up. And the only way you end up with a broad public consensus is by continuing to engage in the conversation and explaining what it is that you're doing and why.
So that brings up a point that Mr. Cormann's brought up. Bring everybody along. How are you within the banking sector talking to your customers about what is sustainable, what is green? How do you differentiate between it when the lines haven't really been clearly drawn yet on a policy level at this point?
It's very difficult. Actually, it's very, very difficult. Just to make an example, there's so much work going on the taxonomy. We're working on European level, we are working on national level. For instance, from banking perspective point of view, we don't know yet what we should report in February. We have a deadline in February, we should report something, defining our assets according to green, not green, and so on. So there's a lot of things to be done in order to create a common understanding so that every stakeholder, each stakeholder around the table understands what we are talking about, okay? And there's still a lot of work to be done, and I think we need to do it in a pragmatic way, otherwise we risk greenwashing and all this kind of topic, which we don't want, because we want to achieve minus 55% in a certain time horizon. We want to be neutral in 2050, and we need to be very transparent. So when we are facing our customers, it can be family households or corporates, business partners, policymakers, there are many, many, many. What I believe it is very much important that we create certain standards and that we create certain blueprints which will help us to bring this. I will make an example. This morning we had a very good discussion on the train from Bratislava here. We had the building, the green building topic, how to make that sustainable. And we are missing these blueprints. How does an end customer, if I talk to a family, how do they know that this is the right way to upgrade their house or to build a new house with this technology? And I believe we need to deliver a certain confidence and like a consumer protection versus these end users in terms of standards. So I'm a very big fan of handbooks and blueprints, because this will ensure that whatever we define will bring also the level. We made the topic today about the housing. Talking with architects, we have 2 million houses or house units in Slovakia, for instance. Most of them need to be renovated, reviewed, and redone, and so on. Most of them have schablons. They are similar constructed, similar done, and so on. So there's easy to identify 3-4 blueprints, work together with business partners, which will deliver the technology in order to, how can I say, upgrade the house so that we achieve that. And this is the second point, the discussion with the business partners. We as bank, we are just an intermediator. We don't have the technology, we don't have the end solution. And this is another thing which I appreciate very much in this kind of platforms, and which I very much support and I like very much, is to have this brainstorming with other partners, business partners. They're coming from energy, how to reduce energy. We are talking about mobility, how to make mobility in towns different. Mayors of the single towns. These are all stakeholders which we need to bring together to discuss and see what we can. That's the second momentum, which I believe very much. And at the end, it was not yet said, what we want to achieve in 2030 goes in terms of reduction of carbonization, decarbonization, requires much more resources than is currently on the plate. On a European level, it is said that it needs additional 200 billion a year, if I'm not wrong. In Slovakia, in order to achieve the target until 2030, we need to chip in 20 billion. In order to get this money mobilized, investors, it was said by Róbert in the opening speech, we need to make sure that the solutions which we are going to find will create a value, because this money needs to be somehow flow, it needs to be repaid back, it needs to create value, it's not a mere donation perspective point of view. And so it will become very much important to understand what are the sustainable financing tools for achieving what we want to achieve.
We have a question in the audience. If we can just pass the mic to Basil.
Thank you very much. My name is Vasil Hurák. I'm one of those who actually came to each of the 10 Tatra summits. I'm very proud of it. I'm actually one of the founders, so maybe that's the pride coming from as a child. But I share the optimism of the panel, and I'm very happy we have optimistic leaders. But I think the situation is not as rosy, probably. And when you look at Europe, there is a tradition of going from crisis to chaos and to suboptimal solutions. And I had the opportunity to spend some time in European politics, and unfortunately this is what happens. So if you look at realities, I take just one of them, which is Capital Markets Union. How long have we been talking about Capital Markets Union? And we all know that this is necessary for Europe to be competitive, not to have situations when most innovative companies from Europe are leaving to United States, Israel, China, wherever. Mm-hmm. And not much happening. So my point is, yes, we are moving forward, kind of muddling through, but the world around is moving in a lightning speed. So I basically want to ask, what do you think, why should Europe be different when looking to the future? What is going to be different? What has to be different for Europe to be really optimistic and to be much quicker with the changes that we need?
Who wants to take that one? Prime Minister?
I can start because we have just the discussion on the European level about the global role of Europe in the world. So, and when you said rosy time right now, definitely not. Yeah, when we're optimistic, it doesn't mean that we don't see the problems, and we just want to look at them as challenges. So definitely there is plenty problems every day we wake up into. So I'm seeing that. But when we see of the vision or the vision of the Europe, I don't think that it's been defined yet. Some people have, or there are different views on what Europe should be, and I think this crisis is going to reveal the motives of the leaders in the Europe. It's already happening, but what's important is that we all realize that if we want to succeed, if Europe wants to succeed, and this is, I would say, one of the last chances for Europe to succeed, otherwise, just like you said, the lightning speed of the other big countries and continents in the world will just take us over, and Europe will be this old continent. So we need to cooperate, and we need to define it very quickly. And it's happening. It's happening every month. We speak about it on the summits. Mm-hmm. So if it doesn't happen within half a year or so, then we'll start losing. When I look at it, Europe, and that's said many times on the summits, we have economically, we are very strong. Also in the green, we are very strong. We're preparing instruments for the innovations, etc. So this is going to be our strength, and we should keep that. But we need to have a strategy, a common or joint strategy toward China, toward Russia, toward the United States, and not rely on maybe some old ties that were here because somehow they're not there anymore.
I might just pop in here too, because I mean, often in these sorts of conversations, yeah. I find that Europeans have a temptation to be quite hard on themselves. I mean, I'm certainly much more positive about what Europe has achieved and continues to achieve, and the prospects for Europe. I mean, of course, you always got to look ahead of, at what else needs to be done. And generally, if a decision can't be made swiftly, it's because there's not an established consensus across the necessarily, the broad community yet that can help carry that forward. But I mean, every now and then you also got to look back and reflect on where you've come from and where you got to. And I mean, the quality of life, the living standards. I mean, the quality of life across Europe now compared to a couple of decades ago. I mean, in this part of the world in particular. I mean, it's extraordinary, like how well Europe has done and continues to do. And Europe has experienced decades and decades of peace, stability, and prosperity. Yes, there have been challenges, and there will be challenges in the future. But the governance arrangements in Europe actually do, have the capacity to work through it. And what can be described as muddling through, it's actually respecting each other's different perspectives and trying to find a way forward that is fair to everyone. I mean, be careful what you wish for. I mean, there are some systems of government that are very efficient, but that doesn't mean that they're better. I mean, we are, across Europe and across the Western world, I mean, we believe in individual liberty, we believe in freedom, we believe in democracy, we believe in, the rule of law, human rights. And, I mean, okay, that can be complicated, can be...
Thank you.
Ms. Pasquali, you and I were talking as we were coming into the summit about this very same thing, that we have great ideas, we take our time getting to the decision, but then we get trapped yet again with red tape, bureaucracy, and the loop goes round and round for the private sector. So tell me, putting Vasil's question into perspective, what do you really need at this point within RBI to make the decisions you need to make sure that you're heading to net zero like the bank wants to and the group wants to?
So thank you. I think it's a very valid question, and there is definitely when you know how Brussels works, there is the risk that it gets a bit diluted, or that there are many things packed into new legislation. So for us as banks or investors, I think the first step, and that has been taken very importantly, that there is a target. We know where we want to go. And the next thing is, and unfortunately here we had in the past we had some negative experience. If we know the target, we have to define the way how to get there. And once it has been defined, it should be also a step-by-step approach, not making the second step before the first one. It has been mentioned, the reporting requirements, this would be like a negative example for that. So step-by-step, be transparent, and what we would need, very important, if you are on the track, stay on it. Yeah, so the legal certainty, don't change the rules every 2 years or too often. Yeah? I mean, a bit of recalibration is always needs to be there, but that would be our #1 priority. Please, if we are on the track, stay on there and don't change the rules.
Don't change the rules is one question. We have another question here in the audience, if I can get a mic there.
Thank you very much. Simeon Tsomokos from the Delphi Economic Forum in Greece. Mr. Prime Minister, we're delighted to have you in Athens recently, and I hope that the relationship between Greece and Slovakia will improve tremendously. Our contribution to the conference is the sunshine, the good weather.
Could you hold the mic up slightly so we can hear you?
Yes, the good weather, we brought you some sunshine from
Thank you very much.
For today and tomorrow. As of Sunday, we're not responsible. Okay.
Fair enough.
Mr. Prime Minister, the question is related with the Western Balkans and the summit last week in Slovenia. I understand there was a very good atmosphere. Everybody was very happy and optimistic. The money that you are going to contribute, 35 billion, is something substantial. But on the other hand, many countries are trying, many other powers are trying to penetrate, the region, Turkey, Russia, China, etc. How do you think we can have a follow-up on all those nice words we listened last time, and we see actually the accession of the Balkans somehow in the family of the European Union? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the question, and I actually mentioned that on the forum. I think Europe's been considered strong because of the strong countries in the Europe. And we are used to negotiations that were bilateral. I mean, European countries with Russia, with China, with the United States, or coalitions, never together. We don't have that, and we don't think of that yet. That's not the mental change yet, so we have to have that mental change. And I think we need to be very open to each other, because formally, yes, club, declaration, very good, but at the table, we were quite open, and we said, okay, but we heard this 2003. It's 2021. Maybe one word changed, enlargement. That's all. Everything, all the words seem pretty much the same. So what's going to happen? Everybody said, okay, enough of words. Action, please. Action. And usually they say that you need to say something for 9 months before the people start to do it. On the European level, it takes much more years. But definitely we have to have the push for action. Private sector understand that language, because you cannot allow yourself to have words. Governments, yeah, they can get by 5, 10, 15 years. So we need people in the governments who are people of action. We need to be pushed into action, and we need to be really blamed if there is no action.
How would you like to be pushed into action? Specifics that you can send into the room.
Well, I experience it every day, don't believe me. If you said that, the companies come, they go, bail us out. No, guys, let's have a fair talk. So that's a push, that's definitely a push. But then we need to go into a fair discussion where we sit, we pull our papers, we pull our data, and we go data-based. That's the importance. Because many times it's about, okay, let's have some promises, let's have a declaration. We all know declaration is a good start. If you have declaration every year, you're doing something wrong. One declaration is enough. Then let's go and let's put a strategy, and then let's put a business plan together, and then execute it. That's it.
We have another question in the front.
Thank you. Pierre Winch, Governor, National Bank of Belgium. By the way, Secretary General, I fully agree with you. I think we should stop comparing Europe with the United States of America. We don't have one unique democracy with one common language, so it takes a bit more of time, but indeed we do better than muddling through. I would like to come back to this issue of reporting and taxonomy, because I'm faced with a question, and I don't know if you've got an answer to it. It used to be that we had ETS, and ETS as an economist is very simple. It's a Pigouvian tax, it's a tax on, or a price on carbon, and it's morally neutral. So the aim is to be efficient. So it might be that your company, it's very expensive to reduce emissions, so you're not going to do it, and you're going to buy a permit to another one who's going to do double as much as you are going to do. And the aim is to go for carbon neutrality as efficiently as possible. And then we come with a taxonomy. And then suddenly we've got good guys, bad guys, or girls, and in between, or women, and in between. How do we reconcile that? I mean, because suddenly you are compliant with ETS, and someone is telling you, oh, but you are bad in taxonomy. What does it mean? And I don't think we are having that debate. So there is this kind of blurred picture where you might have companies to which you provide credit that are fully in compliance with ETS. By the way, it's legal and it's an obligation. And then suddenly there are bad guys or women or whatever. What do you do? What is the expectation? And I'm coming back to your comment, which is we need an objective and a timetable. And I have sometimes the impression that with the taxonomy and green finance, suddenly it's, 2050 is way too long, 2030 is way too long, it has to be today. We need to stop financing the bad guys. And I mean, this is panic football. This is not going to work. So I just wanted to have your opinion on that one.
I think let's start with Mr. Cormann's opinion on that. It is a very, very valid point, and it was actually going to be the next point that I made. How do you define the good guys from the bad guys? It depends on every economy and whichever sectors are strongest in every nation. How do you do it?
Well, I mean, I guess that this is the point that I was trying to make earlier. And I mean, in the end, we do need a globally coordinated approach, but we also need to bring more consistency into it. But you've got to do that in a political environment where you've got to take populations with you. And the political dynamic is going to be different from country to country, depending on the economic structure in a particular part of the world. And we've got to try and find a way to bring all of that together. Now, in some countries, and it is true. Carbon pricing, explicit carbon pricing, is the most efficient way to go. And if there was a globally consistent carbon price, that would be the most efficient way to get to the objective that we want to get to over a set period. And I mean, that's been the right argument for a very long time. The problem is if you pursue that in some parts of the world in isolation, and in particular those parts of the world that are surrounded by low-cost manufacturing nations that are comparatively more polluting, and you end up shifting economic activity, jobs and emissions to your neighborhood where emissions are going to be higher than they otherwise would have been, so you make the situation worse for the global environment as well as for your local economy. That makes the politics more difficult. So which then means that if carbon pricing isn't in place all around the world in a way that is sufficiently comprehensive and consistent without carbon leakage and competitiveness implications, then you end up with all sorts of other policy instruments and policy measures to complement an inadequate global carbon pricing arrangements. And that's where regulatory approaches and subsidies and renewable energy targets and investment approaches, I mean, that is where you end up with a whole series of other instruments, all meritorious in their own right, but perhaps sometimes not entirely consistent with what is meant to be the in theory, most perfect way forward. I mean, I think we're going to have a more constructive, open-minded conversation involving all the key regions of the world, where countries recognize, in the same way as you do within the European Union, each other's genuine challenges, but also the genuineness of your motivation in terms of getting to global net zero, and working sensibly through how each country can, in the most sensible fashion, manage the transition pathway. And I mean, the Paris Agreement actually, in terms of nationally determined contributions and under Article 6, actually provides for different parts of the world using different approaches in order to get there. I mean, that was specifically foreseen and for good reason. But in the end, what Mr. Wunsch there outlines, that really an emissions trading scheme or price on carbon on its own could be the most efficient way, and why do we worry about all these other things? If it was genuinely in place in an appropriately comprehensive way, that would be true, but it isn't, and until such time as it is, different parts of the economy are trying to, and different parts of the political system try to come up with other levers, and sometimes that is not as efficient, but that is, I think, the context, and that creates the sort of issues that you're talking about.
Prime Minister?
I'll just quickly, when you want to find out whether you're applying the right instruments, you need to always come back to the root of the problem and see if you apply the right principle. I don't think it's about good guys and bad guys. I don't think we should name it that way. If we agree that pollution is a problem for this planet, then we should look what are we doing in order to save it. And from the green perspective, we need to be realistic. Sometimes we put things on the paper which is not realistic, and you know how we find out whether it's realistic? We put it in numbers. We see how much it's going to cost, whether we have the money, and whether we have the will. So, and this is what we need to do. That's why the taxonomy, I think, speaking of nuclear, we are a country of nuclear. And I have very good relationship with Sebastian Kurz, with Austria, and they say no nuclear. I say, okay, you don't have to have that. We need to have that. And definitely for the transition, I don't know how many years, I don't do that estimates. Some people might, but definitely nuclear will be important, will be needed. So what I'm saying, let's not measure it by good or bad. What's realistic? And we're speaking on this again, and that's why it's so slow, because sometimes we don't want to admit, just like you said, the starting point is different country to country. We need to respect that, and we need to work with that, because definitely some countries cannot allow themselves politically and also financially and also mentally such a dramatic shift. And we just have to then say, okay, if we delay, this might be the damage to the planet as we see. And that's why I said, please, let's not focus only on Europe. We did already so much, and we will do more. But
you guys keep setting targets and wanting to be the markers of the world. Unfortunately, the world's looking at us.
Yes, but that's the thing. And I don't agree with that. Let's not put so many things on the paper, or let's say this is on the paper, now let's see what's realistic, and then correct what's on the paper. Because sometimes we have strong words because we want to move, the crowd. But once it's moved, then let's put it into realistic numbers, because I think sometimes we're really going off the board.
Mr. Pasquali, you wanted to come in there?
Well, from the business perspective, we can only support this. I think this is maybe an element that might still be or should be added to this next generation EU debate. That and this is also some kind of prejudice that is always we have towards Brussels. That there's more legislation, more complex legislation coming up. So maybe also to have some innovation coming and growth out of innovation. Maybe let's also have a little bit of streamlining of legislation at the EU level. That would help us as well.
Streamlining of legislation, Mr. Resch?
Well, I would not like to talk about the streamlining of legislation, which for sure simplification always helps to improve productivity. But I would like to come back to the good guys, bad guys topic. It's a really huge topic right now. Yeah? And I can just agree with what is said, that climate is a global issue, and everything what has been said here I endorse. But if we come to the real execution, what is happening in the banks, in the banking sector, looks a little bit different. Yeah? It looks like we are now asked to look in our portfolios. We need to say you're green, you're red, you're orange, you're white, or whatever, and we need to prepare a scale. And it has an impact, because it will have an impact, because automatically this will be linked to our credit policies. Who we are going to support in the future? Are we going to support certain industry or certain other industries? What will be the price for the resources? Because there will be also a fund transfer price automatically. Because if I want to grow in a certain area, I need to subsidize, and I will give them cheaper money, or let's say cheaper resources to do certain things. And this is happening right now. So it is very much important that we have a clear understanding of what we want to achieve. Then let's define how this should be done, or what it means reality, because this is going to happen. It's going to happen next year. All international banks are currently working on an ESG strategy. We are already looking at our customer, are you black, blah, 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 whatever color you are. It's coming, and it's coming next year. It's not coming in 3, 4, 5 years. So that's a really topic. That's the first thing. And the second, what will come, what I found quite interesting is, according to the requirements, all customers, and I'm talking about merely companies, they should get an ESG scoring. So what is their impact? What is their footprint? And what is quite funny, and I say it from my perspective, each bank is working on a nice questionnaire, 500 questions, data not available, not validatable whatsoever, and we will come up with a nice score, okay? So, and what is very interesting, this customer has not one bank. This customer might have N banks, and he might have the pleasure to fulfill N questionnaire, and they might not lead to the same outcome. So I think there's a lot of things which we can do on a national, on a European regional level in order to coordinate that, because that will be imminent tasks we will be facing.
Question from the audience.
So I think there's a lot of things which we can do on a national level.
Take the mask off.
No, one of the issues I want to simply tackle, I'm absolutely in favor of what you have said, Prime Minister. But one of the lessons I think we should learn is, first of all, it's just global what we're talking about. That's new. Since 2008, it was just global. Now, one of the issues we need a global response, and this could be just done by the European Union, what you have said, Prime Minister. But one of the lessons I think we should learn is, first of all, it's just not just responsible for target setting. Since we need political guidance for implementing. That means we need a global response, and this could be just done by the European Union. The European Union has created one of the weaknesses I see. The target was, or the aim was, that to start it policy is not just responsible for target setting. It's not in place, and I expect we need political guidance for implementing it, at least. And I give you the two examples. The idea of the SDGs, the European Union has created the InvestEU. None of the European politicians or the aim was to start it by 1st of January, as it is on the paper. It's not in place, and I expect it will be delayed at least for 1 year. I think the implementation, and I would say a policy guidance for implementation, the idea of the SDGs is nice, but I
sustainable growth. This would also be one thing that we attract, improve the equity base.
Prime Minister, 2 to 3 ways we can effectively implement the funds and the recovery itself to be impactful and smarter.
I think Slovakia is a very good example here.
I'll be honest.
This would also be one thing that we should
don't have good
develop
experience
further.
with implementation. So I'm
Prime Minister, 2 to 3 ways we can effectively implement the funds and the recovery itself to be impactful and smarter.
Put together our strength. We need
I'll
to
be honest.
I always say, please, if you have initiative,
Slovakia, as I
come
said,
on,
we don't have
bring
good
it on.
experience with
We don't have to be the
implementation, so
smartest.
I'm not going to pretend
Let
that we'll
the smartest
do,
people
very well.
bring the solution,
We'll
and
try.
we'll gladly cooperate
Definitely
on
we'll
that.
try.
And
That's why I
on this
say
behalf, I would
three
like to
things.
thank
We need to
Alex and
put
also
together
the Slovak Banking
our
Association
strength.
for
We
helping
need
and
to
also
I always say,
providing
please,
this
if you have
memorandum
initiative,
on
come on,
going towards
bring it on.
sustainables.
We don't
and
have to be the
preparing
smartest.
funding for it.
Let
I think that's one
the
of
smartest
the
people
good examples
bring a
of
solution,
how
and
it
we'll
needs to be
gladly
done.
cooperate on
And
that.
when we
on
speak
this behalf,
of
I would like to thank
of the
Alex
regulation
and
policies,
also the
etc.,
Slovak Banking
well,
Association for
we will try
helping
to
and
be
also
as much
providing
understandable as possible,
but
going towards
as I said,
sustainables and
we're not good at
preparing
it,
funding
so please
for
help
it.
us.
I think that's one of the good examples of how
And
how
when
it
we
needs to be
speak
done.
of
And when we
the
speak
regulation
of
policies, etc.,
of the regulation
well,
policies, etc.,
we will try to be as much understandable as possible. We're not good at it, so please help us.
We're not good at it,
Please
so
help
please
us
help
to
us.
the method.
For
And they
data,
go,
okay, you're
how?
asking us for data.
So,
how? And that's why we need the negotiation.
and that's why we need the
negotiation.
the effort
let's
together.
Let's build
the
on
effort
experience,
together.
please. Let's
That's
build on experience.
please.
That's what I want.
Let's
give us your experience.
that's
we'll
what I
give
want.
you ours.
Give us your
to each
experience.
other.
We'll give you ours.
And
Listen
the
to each
last
other.
thing. And
Don't panic.
the last thing.
And never give up.
Don't panic and never give up.
Mr. Cormann.
Thank you.
Mr. Cormann.
Thanks. I mean, in summing up, I'll just touch on a few things. In summing up, I'll just touch on a few things. I mean, if we want to, optimize, if we want to. Is further outbreaks of the virus and potentially different so economic policy priority one. So economic policy priority one in terms of underpinning, get as many people all around the world, get as many people all around Europe vaccinated. I mean, that all around Europe vaccinated. The number one economic policy priority. The number one economic policy priority. And then, of course, beyond that, of course, I mean, a lot of crisis level fiscal support was put into the economy in a blanket fashion into the economy in a blanket fashion. We now, of course, need to continue time. we now, of course, need to continue better target where there's better target still being provided, where there's channel into still being provided, channel into future focused investment. One of the areas that we haven't really one of the areas that we haven't really digital transformation, the whole digital transformation. So the digital transformation has accelerated, but there are still the pandemic, but there are still some things that we can and must do in order to really optimize, the benefits from it, including, better investment in universal access to high-quality digital infrastructure, making sure that our workforce is equipped with the skills they need in order to also, get through that transition. Reskilling, upskilling of the workforce to make sure that people can genuinely participate and benefit from the digital transformation is really important. And then there's a whole range of associated risks and challenges when it comes to the digital transformation that we've got to get better on top of. I mean, cybersecurity, an obvious one. Small and medium-sized business across many parts of Europe, an important part of the economy, a central part of the economy. How do we get them more strongly into the digital transformation, but also how do we support them, managing all of the risks and disruptions that sort of come with it. And then the final point that I'll just make, I mean, yes, Europe has got a big internal market, and that's fantastic, and that's been very good for Europe's economic prosperity. But Europe is also, and the countries of Europe are trading nations globally, and we really need to we need like-minded market-based democracies around the world to focus on the reforms required to ensure we have a well-functioning global market. And there's some work to be done on that front.
Mr. Resch.
From my perspective point of view, we have a clear agenda of what we would like to achieve with next generation. And it goes beyond the Green Deal, it goes into digitalization, it goes into inclusion, equality topics and so on. I believe, I would like to say the first message, or what I very much like what Vasil was saying before. We need to be faster and we need to be more pragmatic. In order to be faster and more pragmatic, we need to create the bridge not only between policymaker and private sector, but also cross-functional in the private sector. Because we can learn from each other, we can support each other. And having these close dialogues, platforms, whatever, this will help us to be faster and more pragmatic with a real input. And I would really invest in this. The second topic, I would say, you were saying it really with the political guidance, how to bring it down really to reality. Because we will centrally define programs, they sound nice, we will define even blueprints. But at the end, we will need regional, local know-how, expertise, people who will execute and realize. So we need to think how to create this know-how in a smaller community to then do and realize what has been defined. And I believe this is another very important aspect which needs to be thought through, because otherwise action will not follow or will not bring the results we would like to have. And the last but not least, I would really like to see next year on GLOBSEC somehow an information of what we have achieved in the last year. Because let's not forget, there's 2030. Yeah? And I would really like to understand if all the initiatives, what we are doing, discussing, lead to the value, lead to the target we would like to achieve. So I would really like to see, okay, what did we last year? We were able to do this, this, this. Great. Are we on the right track? And that's, I believe it's very much important. Monitoring.
You might get a little tip from the transformation index that is downstairs, but I think GLOBSEC's taken that on board. Please give a round of applause to this panel for setting this theme, setting the scene for our discussions that will happen for the rest of the day. Gentlemen, thank you so very much and for indulging me. We're going to take a short coffee break at this point. Let's all catch up in the lobby downstairs. We'll meet back here at 2:30. The next session is going to be a deep dive into the aftermath of the German elections. That session is going to be led by Roland Freudenstein.